ready?
Yes, we're ready. We're raring to go. Can you see that, everybody?
I can, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I can see it as well, Lucy. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, it will come as no surprise to those of you who already know us that Sarah and I have really enjoyed planning this presentation for you this evening. It's something we both feel very passionate about. It's been an amazing experience and journey to this point where we are able to share with you the joys and information about becoming a SENCo. So we'd like to talk to you today about the SENCo as career pathway, and we're going to focus on the journey from teacher to SENCo in particular. So what is the role of the SENCo? So schools, SENCos have a strategic role in schools to improve SEND provision and practice and to reduce barriers to learning. It is a statutory role which first appeared in 1994 as a designated person for overall coordination responsibility of children with additional support needs, and this was cemented in the Children and Families Act 2014, whereby the role of SENCo was clarified as a strategic one with overall responsibility for overseeing and coordinating support for children with special educational needs and disabilities in the school. Since 2009, all SENCos must complete a NASENCo qualification, and what this looks like is a level 7 postgraduate qualification, and it is the crystallisation of the development of expertise which we now know as the SENCo role today. Any newly appointed SENCos or SENCos in post for less than a year must achieve the NASENCo qualification within 3 years of their appointment. They need to have QTS, so you're all in that position to be able to consider the NASENCo qualification, and it's preferable for the SENCo to be included on the senior leadership team due to the strategic nature of the role and responsibilities over budget, for example, as well as governance. But this is not mandatory. I've been a SENCo who has been on a senior leadership team and also a SENCo who hasn't been on a senior leadership team. The NASENCo qualification involves completing a set of learning outcomes which are nationally agreed and regulated by the NASEN organisation. The provider, therefore, has to be a higher education institution or affiliated to one due to the nature of the master's level study required.
Right, so we're talking about a really interesting time in terms of our interactions with children and families where there is a special educational need, and also some of the ideas that have come from the government consultation on SEND and alternate provision. Now, alternative provision can refer to PRUs, pupil referral units, or they can be particular nurture provision that is provided for a short period of time so that a child can access education in a mainstream setting. So we can see that over the next 2-3 years, there are going to be developments in terms of the code of practice, but also developments in terms of the role itself. So just to get you a little bit of a feeling for what has actually been decided, one of the issues that came up prior to the consultation was that children were having a different experience of SEN support, guidance, funding, dependent upon where they were living in the country. Now, we sometimes call that postcode lottery. And that was the experience that they found when they went out to consultation. So what they're trying to do is they're trying to bring in national standards and nationally similar processes for a child accessing funding. So the EHC plan, for example, will be online and they are going to try and reduce the incredibly onerous task that is currently completing an EHC for a child. They're going to look at local and national dashboards that will show how well the local area is functioning in terms of SEND support. And they're going to have a look at having a professional qualification for SENCos in the future. Won't be for a while yet, because we need the SEN code of practice as well before we can do this. But we envisage some changes to the National Award for SENCos by probably 2026. So dependent upon where in your career you are in terms of applying to be a SENCo, you may or may not take the new SENCo award. But either way, it'll still be based on what is a good SENCo and how they work with colleagues, but also how they work with children. And they're going to start investing some more money into special education by opening more special schools and more alternative provision, and also by upskilling. So we envisage an early years SENCo award at level 3, they're saying at the moment, which is obviously before degree level, it's A-level equivalent. But we hope, as Lucy and I are also passionate about early years as we are about SEND, we hope that that professionalism that's expected of a general SENCo will also be expected of an early years SENCo, when quite often you're working with children who don't have the diagnosis as yet. So basically, more should be coming our way. But if you want to read that document, they produced it only in March, so it's brand new. And there is an easy read version if you want 43 pages as opposed to 143. But it is a useful document to take a look at.
So as Sarah said, the key roles and responsibilities of the SENCo, regardless of developments that will be coming in the future, remain pretty much what you see on this slide. Just while you're reading through this slide, please reflect on the experiences that you've had working with SENCos. Think about how you liaise and work in partnership with your SENCo, and how you put into practice the advice and the guidance that the SENCo may have provided you with in your teaching. So just reflect on that while you're reading. As you can see, there's quite a lot of demands on the SENCo to maintain paperwork, and whilst that is a key part of the job, which requires keeping up to date and reviewing the SEN register regularly, writing down about additional and different support, and making sure that everything is up to date from a record keeping point of view. One of the key responsibilities and key uses of time, which we'll talk about in a moment, is liaison. We liaise with parents, pupils, professionals, agencies, teachers, TAs, the wider community and experts. And all of that information feeds into your role on a day-to-day basis. So although the responsibilities on this slide kind of provide an overall summary, which is drawn from the SEN Code of Practice of the key responsibilities that the SENCo may be involved in, it doesn't capture that day-to-day experience of being a SENCo. So we thought that might be interesting for you to gain an insight in. And I'll start by asking Sarah to provide us with an insight into the SENCo role. Sarah, what motivated you to become a SENCo?
I think initially it was when I became a parent, and my older child has a visual impairment and dyspraxia. And what surprised me, I mean, we're talking 25 years ago, so we're talking a long time ago now. But what surprised me was the teachers were worried about teaching him. But to me, he was a normal little boy. He's quite intelligent, very articulate, very willing to join in. But yes, he was blind and he had dyspraxia, so he fell over a lot. But it didn't, to me, seem like it should be too much of a job to include him in the classroom. And even the teachers that he had who knew him quite well had expressed some concern. So because I like reading, I read a lot around what inclusion should look like. And then I became a SENCo because I wanted to be a passionate somebody who stood up for individuals who maybe were missing out something in education. And as I said, I became a SENCo well before the code of practice and before the requirement to do a national award. So most of my learning happened from my own research and personal experiences. What about you, Lucy?
Yes, it starts with passion, that journey. It starts with passion and commitment and a desire to be an advocate for a range of people who I came into contact with as a young person. I travelled before university and worked in various communities in Africa and France. And when I settled down to do a degree eventually in Edinburgh, I became involved with Lothian Autistic Society. Having worked with MENCAP as part of my a volunteer placement on my time out, and I really appreciated and the struggles really that many of the children and families were going through on a day-to-day basis to gain access to mainstream education. And initially, it makes you quite angry and it makes you quite frustrated, and you feel the frustration on behalf of those children and parents. And then you realise that you can do something about it. And that's where I decided to begin my SENCo journey and decided to get QTS. So that's me in that picture there, in my role as SENCo, supporting children in a classroom, because you're also a classroom teacher as a SENCo. You have a responsibility not only for your class, but also for all of the children who have or have not been identified as having special educational needs and disabilities in your school. So your day is very busy. You're in and out of classrooms, and you move between different spaces in the school. But I think underpinning all of that busyness and all of those demands is the ultimate feeling of being an advocate for children, young people and their families, which is a real pride and positive feeling in the job. Yeah. Sarah, how did you manage a work-life balance being SENCo?
Try not to laugh too hysterically, as I'm sure you're all experiencing, whether you've just done your final placement or you're doing your ECT year. A day in a primary school or secondary school can be extremely busy, and those wonderful plans that you had for the week can very often go up in the air. So I would always have a plan for what I wanted to do for my SENCo hours, and they weren't that many. But the things that I would prioritize, if a parent had come in the morning, you can't say to them, right, I'll see you 2 weeks on Thursday because that's the next time I've got a gap in my diary. If it's urgent enough for them to be in, then they will have got stressed about something, and dealing with it on the spot is always the best idea. So parents would get priority. But also, if I had agreed with a teacher that I would go in and observe a child or help them with a child, I would always make sure I did that, because the teacher had obviously brought this up for a good reason and they were expecting me, and I wouldn't want to let them down. But other things like paperwork, data, policy writing, budget creation would very often happen outside school hours. And as it happens, I enjoy that sort of stuff. So it didn't feel that onerous to be doing it outside of my normal teaching commitment. But it is worth bearing in mind, if you're thinking of taking on the role, that your time that you are given is not equal to the time it will take. What about you, Lucy?
I agree with that. I think the investment of time in people is really important, particularly children and parents, because they are your experts. They will provide that insight into your what you need to do in terms of paperwork. So when you do sit down to complete, the forms and to make requests for involvement and to complete court of concerns, etc., that information is gathered through the day-to-day interactions with the children. So observations were my priority, spending time with children and talking to parents as much as possible, as you'll see later on. That really is key. These kind of day-to-day tasks as well kind of will give you a bit of an insight, a bit of an overview as to the different demands on your time. But it's about being able to manage priorities, as Sarah said, and working out what needs urgent attention and what can be done in a later stage. And as I said to Sarah earlier, it's also because you've got that conviction and passion and commitment as a SENCo, you also need to convey that to your senior leadership team and governors to demand time and to ask for support, because it will pay off for them in the long run and for you as a whole school to release SENCos to be able to complete their work for the whole school. And on this slide here are the 6 letters which normally instill fear into teachers, but we're quite a strange breed as SENCos, aren't we, Sarah?
Yeah, definitely. We're quite a strange breed anyway, Lucy, because we both discovered today that once that Ofsted phone call happens, rather than dread and hiding under the duvet, we both get quite a bit of adrenaline rush and, actually quite enjoy the process, which is very weird but true. And it is one of those things, sorry about the dog, she's been a pain all day. It is one of those things that you will be expected to do as a SENCo, is you would be, there definitely will have a meeting that is focused on SEND, sometimes a couple of meetings. So you would be representing your school in those meetings, and quite often on your own, not necessarily with other senior leaders helping you out. But I used to actually really quite enjoy showing an Ofsted inspector how well we had done. And we would give them case studies, not just the overall data, which hopefully would sell a good picture, but also the day-to-day stuff. These are the differences we're making, maybe that can't be captured by academic progress, but could be captured in other ways. So yeah, sorry, Ofsted, whilst I obviously fearful of some results from them, actually did quite enjoy talking to them as a SENCo. So Lucy, we're sort of racing through our time, would you believe? So if we move on to sort of our wider commitments as SENCo, do you want to talk us through this diagram?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I spent quite a while making this diagram, thinking about what happens in your everyday role. But this is a map, if you like, of the interactions that you have on a day-to-day basis as SENCo. Something that I love about the job is this level of interaction. You get to work with experts in external services to gather information and learn from psychology, education, health and care about different ways of supporting children. We work with, get my pointer, that'll help us, won't it? We work with teachers, obviously, consulting and supporting them and support staff and TAs to plan effective quality first teaching and put into place interventions that are evidence-based and will have positive outcomes on pupils. And it's this side really of the diagram where I spend most of my time as SENCo, talking to pupils and children who are involved with those pupils in their kind of network of support as friends and peers. Parents and carers, obviously, as Sarah said, you know, they will talk to you about concerns, but you need to be able to listen and provide that time and space for them to be heard. One of the most frustrating things as a parent is that you know, you're either turned away because there's no time, or your concerns are dismissed. So it's really important that we pay attention to what parents are telling us about what happens at home, for example, when the children come home from school. Because what we see in school is very often a different picture from what parents see at home. And there are many reasons for that, but one reason might be that children are able, or they feel like they have to keep masking certain anxieties and certain behaviours at school. So it might look like to the teacher that they're getting on fine, they're compliant, they're doing really well, but then when they go home, that release of anxiety happens and we have high level challenging behaviour, or stimming, or switching off, or you know, flight, fright, freeze as a reaction to the school day. And we only know that when we have those conversations with parents.
I think what's interesting, Lucy, is that you've highlighted the right-hand side of the table as the one where we want to spend most of our time. But quite often it's the left-hand side of your drawing that puts us down a certain pathway in terms of being a SENCo. Just thinking about being a parent again, to me, Jack was Jack, but to school, he was a bunch of symptoms, because external services, funding, the government, data, all has to be recorded against a label. And one of the difficulties, I don't know if you've already sensed this in school, but one of the difficulties is while you're at university, we talk to you about inclusion, and we talk to you about putting the child in the middle of anything that we plan to do. We talk about the fact that we're looking at how we can adapt our practice, not how the child has to adapt to us. But you won't get the funding if you don't give their need a label. And for me, that could be one of the most frustrating parts of being a SENCo, is that you have to jump through certain hoops in order to get the money into school, in order to do what we want to do to help those children.
And these are the experts that Sarah's talking about. On the side of diagnosis, they can be very useful for identifying certain barriers to learning. But also what I used to love very, very much was having that expertise in the school, in your classroom, sitting down at a table and learning from people who have completed different degree pathways, who have developed their practice in psychology, for example, or nursing, or physiotherapy, or you know, ICT and assistive technology. So all of these people are the experts, and the more time you can get with these people, the more knowledgeable you become to be able to not only support needs but identify needs as you're working with different children and as they emerge over time.
So we wanted to give you a little bit of insight into what you can do to become a SENCo. But first of all, we thought you might be interested in a case that we are both proud of. So Lucy, do you want to start with your case, because it's really interesting?
Well, this is you know, something I feel most proud of in my career as SENCo, due to the journey that I went on as a SENCo with this family and this child. And I joined the school at a point at which the child was being excluded from mainstream teaching, and staff in the school were really struggling with keeping the child in the classroom due to high level anxiety that the child was experiencing, which resulted in high level challenging behaviour and violent and aggressive meltdowns. It was a real, you know, it was a real kind of start to a new SENCo job in a different school where I had been SENCo before and experienced that level of behaviour before from other children. But what needed to happen in that school was a complete cultural and institutional change. So cultures and values and attitudes regarding inclusion need to be addressed. We needed to think about quality first teaching and high quality teaching practices and embed them in what everybody was doing in every classroom. We needed to really think about whole school structures such as assemblies and corridors and transitions and lunch times and playground, and that was a massive job. But the main thing that needed to happen was frank and honest and open, transparent conversations with parents and carers, and that's where I started. And it wasn't an easy start. It wasn't an easy start. In fact, I was met with quite a lot of resistance. And it took that building over time of getting support in place and putting into place assess, plan, do, review, meeting with parents regularly and working really closely with the child to build those relationships. And it got to the point at which, the family decided that an assessment of need was needed in a holistic way. And they went down what's called the ADOS, which is an autism diagnosis assessment. And the child was diagnosed with autism, but what this assessment enabled us to do, removing the autism from the label, was it provided a holistic insight into the barriers that the child was experiencing in speech, language and communication, sensory and physical and cognitive and learning. And what we managed to do then was plan again, moving forward to prepare for EHCP and work with other agencies. Once you've got that label, as Sarah said, it does open doors to be able to get external support more readily. And to cut a very, very long and very, very hard journey short, the parents, in fact, likened it to climbing Everest with me as their Sherpa. That journey has resulted in the child not only being fully included and feeling accepted, but their happiness, well-being and achievement who is now got 11 GCSEs, and we've got a fantastic relationship still, even now. So it's a great it's one of the biggest kind of examples of what a SENCo can do to affect change on an individual and a family. And I know Sarah has one to share with you also.
Yeah, I will try and be quick because I know we want to try and keep to time, but we are hopeless at it. So please forgive us. My case actually is over 20 years old. Just had a thought that this child I'm going to talk about is now herring towards 30 at a great rate of knots. But I was head of a international primary school in Thailand at the time. Now, most international schools are selective and they're also fee paying. So a lot of the schools around us would not accept children with special educational needs. They were going for high academic outcomes and could be selective. So this child, year one age, but had never been in either a nursery, a play group, an early years setting, had really not interacted much with other children at all and was an only child. He was diagnosed with ADHD, and we were the only school in Bangkok that was going to take him. So we had a little bit of uphill battle. There was also a cultural element to it. So I was explaining to Lucy earlier that Southeast Asian parents very often find if their child has a special need or disability, they're quite embarrassed by it and they won't talk about it, which is one of the reasons this child hadn't been in school. And actually this changed a little bit. I was in Thailand when the tsunami happened and the king's son, a grandson, died in the tsunami. But he had autism, and most Thai people had not seen a picture of him or talked about him because the family had never shared any images because of this autism. So when he died and his mother, the princess, talked about his death, there was a little bit of a sea change in Thailand around disability. But anyway, going back to my child with ADHD, we did get him into school, into year 1, and he did do some of those spontaneous behaviours that aren't compliant. Giving him a pair of scissors was not a good idea in the early days. But we stuck with it. And one of the things I was hugely proud of was his mum, because the parents had been very prejudiced against having this child in the school, to the point where on one occasion a child came in with party invitations for all of the other children in the class except for him, which did make me a little bit mad, and I had to be talked down from actually doing something about that. So yeah, very difficult early days, but the teachers stuck with it. We gave the support. We did a gradual lead into full-time commitment to school. Lots and lots of work with Mum, who was brilliant. And the thing that makes me proud is by the time I was leaving that school to come back to England, the child got, at the end of that academic year, the Pupil of the Year award, because he was able to settle. He was showing what his intellectual capacity was, and it was very good. So yeah, proud of that one.
And I think that's what resonates with us now as we've moved into higher education is, you know, the impact that you have as a SENCo can't be underestimated. You know, and the ripple effect of that is still going now for those children. So I'm sure you're asking, how can you get started? We know you all want to become passionate SENCos, so we're going to provide you with a bit of an insight into what you can do now as ECTs and going into your ECT year, and then how you can move that forward to become a qualified SENCo. So this isn't an exhaustive list, but what you really need to do is get familiar with SEND. Read, and get to know your particular school's SEND policy and information report, which is a mandatory publication on your school website. You need to build that professional relationship with your SENCo and spend time with them. If you know that they will be passionate and committed individuals, because it takes that to be a SENCo, and they will be really happy to support your journey. Spend time shadowing them, support them where you can. One of the best questions you can ask a SENCo is, what can I do for you? Can I take something off your hands? So go to them and ask them if they can delegate to you. Alongside the SENCo, spend time with the children on the SEND register outside of your class. So that helps you to develop an understanding of whole school needs and EHCPs and individual support plans. If you're lucky enough to attend a governor update with your SENCo, that's a really useful thing. And find out if there's a SENCo cluster group. There's quite a lot online as well, such as you know, informal networks that you can join. And there's lots of expertise, although quite a lot of not expertise floating around on those. So be selective in the information that you gather. So we have selected some information pathways which will support your understanding of SEND and disability through your own research. Firstly, you're here, you're attending this webinar, so that's a great start. Where you can take it from here is to go onto the NASEN and the SEND Gateway, which also have free resources and free webinars with a sign up. Local networks, as we said, and specific charities websites for different SEND. And these are really useful starting points for looking into specific learning difficulties, such as the autism.org website, dyslexia.uk, and ADHD support as well. But the main thing you need to do, and I keep saying this, but it's true, is spend time with pupils and parents in the SENCo, and get as much time with professionals as you can who work with children with SEND across different contexts. So that educational psychologist who comes to observe your child in your classroom, make sure that you ask them the questions that you want and find out about how you can move your learning forward, because these are your experts. We talked about time, and this has been recognised as a concern for some time, and you can read further into this by Garner and Crown, etc. And there's a SENCo workload research at the moment. But in order to get to that role, and it's really good practice to start to do these things in your role as teacher, because the more organised you are as teacher and the more that you spend time talking to people, the easier being a SENCo is at the beginning of that journey. One of the things we talked about earlier, Sarah and I, was that planning your year with key send deadlines is really key. Protect your time and invest in research and time for send. Keep track of your CPD. You get a fancy certificate for this one, but keep track of all of the websites you access and the webinars you attend. Write it all down, because that is all going to help you. And get organised. So start establishing files on your OneDrive, start to think about where you can begin to establish files, for example, and practice prioritising, because that's not an easy skill. And knowing what to attend to and when is a key part of the SENCo role. We've also said at the end of here about being selective about the NASENCo award. There are many providers across the UK. However, some of these are online, some of these are in person. We'll give you a brief overview now of the NASENCo at York St John, because that's what Sarah and I have been working on for a number of years now. And there's a link here for you to click on to find out more information, but we'll provide you with a brief introduction as to, hopefully, we'll get some of you back as alumni with a discount to come on the NASENCo course. Oh, yeah, that's me. So the aim of the programme is to really provide that in-depth knowledge and understanding of special educational needs and inclusion. This is practice-based, so although the research and scholarship is additional to an everyday SENCo role, it informs practice. So we make sure there's always that link between research into schools and research into practice to have an impact on the schools in which you work. You develop your skills of reflection on practice with particular reference to SEN, and that includes personalisation, inclusion, leadership and collaboration. As a level 7 masters, you engage in intellectually rigorous ways with current policy issues and developments. And then you also have that opportunity to add value and impact on the development of knowledge. And certainly teaching on the course has had that impact on me. My knowledge is informed through the interactions with SENCos to provide that context for practice in various schools and settings. You also learn how to problem solve, reflect critically, learn independently. And one of the biggest outcomes of the NASENCo course is a network of colleagues who you can go to and share good practice with. And this has been, a really positive feedback from the in-person, offer at York St John, that on a Wednesday afternoon we troubleshoot, we go through everything that we need to go through, and then that depth of scholarship is put into place. Yeah, so the curiosity and skills about inquiry enable you to progress further. So you might take that NASENCo qualification as a leaping pad, a launch pad into a further master's study or PhD or professional doctorate. And here are the outcomes, which I won't read through, but there are 3 key parts based on professional knowledge, understanding, leading and coordinating provision, and personal and professional qualities, which are assessed within the framework for higher qualifications at level 7.
And just to give you a very brief look at what the modules are, they're taught termly, so there are 3 terms and 3 modules as opposed to 2 semesters. The first 2 modules are taught. So as Lucy said, we normally do a Wednesday afternoon, 1 till around 4:30, 5 o'clock. And, quite a lot of the last little bit is getting people, ready to face the rest of their week. The first module looks at leading and evaluating change. So some very practical skills like how do you write an action plan for whole school SEND? How do you manage data? How do you manage the budget? So some very practical things, but put against critical studies. So looking at evaluation studies of good practice, etc., national policy and what that means. The second module, which again is taught, is looking really at the child and how you work with the child, what interventions work, how they work, and how you should manage the work of the teaching assistants, who quite often are line managed by the SENCo, certainly those teaching assistants who work with children on the SEN register. And then the third term is not taught, and this is the portfolio. So it's a necessity to attain the award, and it's a portfolio of evidence against the learning outcomes. That's why really you need to either be a SENCo already or be shadowing the SENCo at the very least before you can start the award, because although starting early is a good idea because you are relatively recently left from writing essays and things like that, but you would not be able to put portfolio together unless you were the SENCo or shadowing the SENCo. So that is the NA SENCo award. We hope to attract some people. And basically the award is approved by NASEN. We have qualified for the quality award with that. Lucy and I teach on it at the moment, but we also have another member of staff who has been a regional coordinator of SEND, so a slightly different role. But we learn as much from each other and from the SENCos, as Lucy said. And now we've been 45 minutes, Lucy, so I think we better start.
Yeah. Okay, that's great. And yeah, thank you. So so all of that was you know, is national in the NASEN qualifications as well. Yeah. Thank you. Shall I stop sharing now, Louise?
You can, and I'm going to stop recording.